I'm happy to be able to be here today to present Rae Ringel. Rae Ringel is the president of the Ringel Group. She is a PCC certified executive coach and leadership trainer with an expertise in transforming professional performance. The Ringel Group serves a growing list of executives in U.S. and global corporations. Rae has devoted years to train and coach executives to become more effective managers, better public speakers, enhance their presence, and help chart a clear course of personal and business growth. Rae is globally recognized as an innovator in the field of nonprofit fundraising and board development. In economic downturns and financial turmoil, foundations around the world have turned to the Ringel Group to reevaluate their mission, structure, board, and professional base. Rae has designed cutting-edge coaching programs to advance professional performance at all levels within an organization. Through these programs, the Ringel Group has enabled foundations and corporations to do more with less. Rae also serves as a facilitation skills trainer for both the private and public sector. Rae is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of University of Rochester. She received her master's degree in organizational psychology from Columbia University and earned her executive coaching certification from Georgetown University, where she's currently on faculty in the leadership coaching program. Rae lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband and 4 children. Please welcome Rae Ringel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hold on, let me just start on the right slide here. Hold on. Okay, I'm so glad that you guys are here today, and I just want to, before diving in, offer 2 assumptions under which I'm going to be working this morning. The first is to really succeed and thrive in the nonprofit world or the NGO sector, you must be an exceptional fundraiser. You must be an exceptional fundraiser. The second thing I want to say is every single thing that you need to be an exceptional fundraiser, every single one of you already has. Most of it is right here. It's just right here. So my bias in teaching fundraising, and I've been doing this for 20 years, is I'm not even going to touch the skills and the techniques and how to negotiate an increase and all the techniques that are so important about fundraising. I can't even go near them until we fundamentally address the attitude and the perspective and how we show up in a fundraising conversation. So this is my bias, not only because I'm a psychologist by training and I teach a lot around presence, but it's the same concept with public speaking. Right? You can teach someone platform skills and what to do with their hands, and you can teach them skills for a year, but if you don't address the fundamental resistance that people have to getting up in front of a room, they're never going to do it, or they're going to break out in hives every time they do. Right? So it's the same thing with fundraising. If we don't address the fundamental underlying discomfort with asking people for money, never going to do it, or you're going to do it and hate it, and you're going to do it and not be great at it. And I'm telling you right here, right now, that you can be great at this. This is something that's easy, and that I actually believe that asking people for money is a fundamental and core vehicle for engagement and bringing people in, as opposed to pushing people away, which is how most people see it, right? Like, oh, I'll do anything you want, just don't ask me to ask people for money. No, right? That actually there's a whole new way at looking at the concept of raising funds. And that's first half of this, what I really want to work with you on today is to just dig deep and really challenge our long-held assessments and assumptions around what fundraising is and what fundraising isn't, and really try and see if we can come up with a new perspective, a new thought habit around fundraising, and then we'll dive more into the skills. Now, we only have an hour and a half. I usually teach this in anywhere between 3 hours and 5 days. So I'm from New York originally, so I'm just going to talk really fast. And I promise that we'll be very interactive. We'll have a lot of time for questions. But my intention today with you is to open your hearts and minds up to this in a new, to this in a new way, so that you'll want to learn more and move forward with this. Good? Great. Now I have a little bit of a different take and spin when I teach this to Jewish organizations, when I teach this in Israel and the States. And what I like to do is I like to draw on Jewish texts and really lean on our tradition no matter where you are in your lifespan of learning Jewish texts. Because I believe that in our tradition and our heritage, there is a lot of ammunition around fundraising. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to start you off with just an initial exercise as a warm-up. And I want to also say that I want you to experience this here today, and everything I'm doing, I want you to take and use with your boards and your staff like it's yours. So experience it, and then we'll talk about how you actually can steal it and use it. I don't mean steal, like just take. And okay, so here we go. First step, when I say the word solicitation, all right, which is typically how we talk about fundraising. To ask someone for money is a solicitation. I want you to tell me the thoughts, the feelings, emotions, like this is your chance. What comes up for you when you think of solicitation? Nerds. Nerds?
Nervous.
Oh, okay. I was like, wow, I haven't heard that one before. Nervous.
No, Ruth told us we were all popular.
Okay, great, great. Telemarketer. What else? What comes up for you? What emotion?
Violation. It's not an emotion.
Violation. What else?
I don't want to do this.
Don't want to do this. What else?
Vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
Very cold, like Lebanese cold.
Cold. What else? Anything else?
Fear of rejection.
Fear of rejection. Love it. Bring it on. What else?
Feeling that it's your only chance, and
If you blow it, it's the last one. Okay, good. Anything else?
Someone else's job.
Oh, is that a feeling or is that a wish? Right?
That's a feeling. Like this should be someone else's job.
Okay. Anything else?
This like sort of long list of previous failures.
So like brings up all those great positive feelings of failure. Right. Okay. Okay. Got it. Okay. So we'll stop there. So this is a pretty typical list that I get, cross-cultural, cross-market. What I am pleased to see is I'm not having, usually I have these sort of visceral like nausea, hives, vomit, like I'm not seeing that, which I'm very pleased it's not having a physical manifestation here, which is great. Okay, so then we go to part 2 of this, and we say, all right, when you think of all the words, right, or the feelings or emotions of what it means to be Jewish, what comes up for you? Stuck up? What else? What comes up for you in being Jewish?
Community.
What else?
Privilege.
too late. Selfless. Warm color.
Education.
What else?
Israel.
Teacher.
Great.
Service.
Wow! Okay, Israel, service, yeah. Go ahead. What other feelings?
Pride.
Love it.
Comfort.
Good. What else?
Nixon.
Nixon?
Victim.
Victim?
Nixon.
Richard. Victim.
Nixon, sorry.
Fix 'em?
Family. Victim.
Oh, okay. I just really don't want to hear that. So, okay. Right. I'm rejecting. What? Tough. Okay. Good. Okay. So, immediately, what do you notice? Like, what did you just notice?
Positive reactions.
Yeah, and like, woo! Just like,
Enough to think about.
yeah. All right. More positive, sort of flows easier, more of those like yummier words, connected words, right? Okay. So, what do you notice now between the two?
Being Jewish is much better than being Muslim.
That's great, right? Exactly. I choose this column. So this is typically the construct that we get. And by the way, not all of you are fundraising for Jewish causes, right? So you might have a different column here. So the column for you might be, what you think of in social justice or helping others or whatever it is. I'm just using this as a construct, fully knowing that this is not relevant. Some of you are working for organizations that are out of the Jewish community. So you can replace this word with anything. But you have to illustrate that there's a distinction between the two. And my point to you is that it has to be both. You have to experience both. And if you don't experience both, then it's not the job for you. Great ways for you to be involved. It has to be both. But I'm not suggesting that this is all touchy-feely, happy-clappy. But if you don't truly believe that leading people to give and leading them to tzedakah is about community and heritage and helping and tradition and pride and privilege. And if you don't believe that it's all these things, you can never be a truly authentic and genuine asker. It has to be both, okay? So let me just give you a perspective, again, from the Jewish historical perspective. The way that our communities were set up many years ago, like in Lithuania and in Eastern Europe, we were set up in shtetls. And basically, to raise money, these people called Gabbai Staka, right? They were the collectors of the charity. They went to every shtetl and they collected people's Jewish tax. Now, in order to be a Gabbai Staka, you had to be elected. You had to be elected into that position. So you had to work your way up through the community for years to receive the distinction and the privilege of being the person who collected the charity. They went to every shtetl, collected the Jewish tax, put it in a pot, like a Harry Potter pot, like a literal pot, and then they counted up the money and decided who needed the money and which services and which families. Which, by the way, that was the makings of the federation system, which we have. That was the beginning of the federation movement, which was airlifted to North America. Okay, so let's fast forward now to 2013. Anyone who shows up, who has a pulse, is allowed to be a solicitor, right? It's no longer like the rock stars of the community. Whoever's willing to do it gets the job. We no longer collect people's tax, because that's just not language that would resonate. We've come so far from that model of being the star of the organization or the community to begging people to do it. And I'm thinking, how are we going to shift that? How are we going to shift that to make people, to elevate the status, once again, of the asker, of the solicitor? Like, this is what keeps me at night, among other things. I want to have like American Idol auditions. Like, I want people to audition to be a solicitor. I don't think anyone's coming to my audition. Right, but this is my dream. Like, I want you to you need to audition if you're going to be bestowed the honor of representing the organization and being an asker. So the only way to start getting back to that place of elevating the status of the asker is to change our thinking and to change our language around it. And it has to start with this room. Like, it's not just going to happen. Any of you read The Tipping Point? Okay, so the premise of that book is that social epidemics and revolutions happen because of 2 or 3 people, right? Like, if this entire room committed to having a new language around fundraising, you have no idea how generative that could be and how much change that could make. But there has to be a commitment to talk about it in a new language, all right? So I want us to take this a step further and start talking about what the Jewish language is around this. And you have in your handouts here, I want you to look through. These are a series of quotes, some text-based, some historical-based. This is some texts that talk about the role of the asker. I want you to read through them and just put a check mark next to the one that resonates for you. All right, who has one that they want to share? Which one spoke to you? Yeah.
I like the Golden Mirror.
Yeah, tell me why.
Nothing in life just happens. It isn't enough to believe in something. You have to have the standards, you need obstacles and overcome the struggle, which I think to me speaks to the fact that it's also not a once-off encounter with the resistance.
Mm-hmm. Good. Mm-hmm. Great. What other ones? Yeah.
I like to say, just as a person lights one candle from another, and the original flame is not diminished, is to whenever lessons and would pass and turn on flame to another person. Like giving and sharing the ideas, like it's amazing, you multiply them.
Yeah.
It's even more light and more.
Beautiful. And there's actually that moment of transfer, like when one flame, it goes down for a minute to light the other, and then there's actually like this moment where it gets really big. This is actually a beautiful quote to use for endowments and legacy and the notion of passing on and strengthening the next generation. Great. What else? Any others? Yeah.
Those who turn the many to tzedakah shall shine like the stars.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very visual.
It's very visual. The Hebrew word is matzdike, which is a causative verb to cause someone to do justice or a righteous act. Okay?
So can you say the Hebrew word again?
Matzdike. So, you know, it's interesting. We spend a lot of times learning texts around what's Jewish about giving and how much do we give and when do we give and Rambam and Maimonides and there's all, you know, and then does the giver know the donor and does the donor know the giver? Like, we spend a lot of time on that, and I just don't think we're spending enough time on what's Jewish about asking and what does our tradition say about it? How does it inform and shape us as askers, regardless if we're working in a Jewish cause or not, right? Because right now I'm not talking about cause, I'm not talking about donor, I'm talking about you and how you are showing up. So for me, what was really transformative in this was the Shulchan Aruch. This is something that I carry with me like every day of my life. If a person convinces another person to give, then their reward is greater than when they give on their own. Okay? What is that saying? That's saying if I give a gift, great. And if I ask, I can't see your name. Stav. If I ask Stav for a gift, Stav, I get 2 points, you get 1. Why do I get 2 points? You're the one who gave. Yeah.
I wouldn't do it without you.
Bingo. She would not have performed the mitzvah of tzedakah without me, whether she didn't know about it or she was involved in other things. So really the only thing that should happen when I ask Stav for a gift is she needs to thank me for asking. How many of you have been thanked for asking before? Okay, this does not mean that I walk into the room and say, Stav, you need to thank me now, right? Like, I don't speak this, but it's totally how I show up. If I show up any other way, I am dead in the water. That I truly believe, and if you remember nothing else from today, I really want you to remember this, that I am here to offer an opportunity for you to perform a righteous act. All right? I am here to invite you and to lead you to perform the mitzvah of tzedakah, right? I'm offering that opportunity. So much so, it's almost as if you don't give, it's your loss. Now, I get that it's my loss. Like, I get that, right? I see the books, I get that. But I'm talking about your mindset when you are walking into the room. So let me just display this for you visually. Here's how most people show up when they ask for money. Are you watching? Because it's very profound. Here we go. I know, and it's such a hard time, and so many people are asking in the economy and right? They comport themselves, literally, they're here, they're right here, and they are speaking from a spirit of apology. Before they've even told the story, they're embodying a spirit of apology. It's in the shoulders, it's in the language, it's in the comporting of the body, literally, like we could do a whole session on just communication through the body, right? But they are already operating from this place of guilt and apology because like money, right? And what I'm talking about is here. I'm standing in front of an incredible product that I believe has a huge return on investment, and I'm inviting you to get in the game. I'm here to extend the invitation. Want to tell you amazing things about it, want to look for that match between you and this organization. Feel so lucky and honored that I get to talk to you about this today. Oh my God. It's like a radical different experience. Apology, opportunity. Right? Here. We do this all the time when we communicate. That shift is transformative. What kind of language have you been using up until now when you have been asking people for money? How have you been apologizing before you've even asked? Now, let me look at this from a different perspective. We tell people to part with their money all the time. We tell them to buy clothes, we tell them to go to restaurants, we tell them to travel, we tell them to go to whatever it is. We have no problem telling people to spend money, right, when we think they're going to benefit from it. Correct? So what happens then when we're asking people to invest in philanthropy or invest in causes? Why do we then start shutting down? What's going on? What's going on? Why do we then all of a sudden shut down and get all discomfort? Fear of rejection, so say more about that, because we have like more of a personal vested interest in, okay, what else?
Also because he received back is not a material thing, so that's the hard part.
Bingo. right? Like you will ingest food or put on a shirt or get a suntan at the beach when you spend your money in this way, right? But when you're asking to give to a philanthropic cause, like you don't always have that tangible, you can't wrap your hands around the product. Okay.
Is it also because when you ask fundraising, you're doing it normally doing it face to face, you're speaking to people, and sometimes if you're trying to market a product, maybe it's done through adverts or something, it's not person to person, you're not opening yourself up.
Like there's not that vulnerability. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, now I want to tell you something else. And if you're thinking about getting your MBA and you don't want to spend the money, here's your MBA in one sentence. Okay, so, or maybe not. But the number one rule for consumer psychology, just kidding. I'm like, that's a really close up. I need a serious makeover for that. Okay, that's called being present. So the number one rule for consumer psychology, why people buy anything in the world, you know, a car, a product, or this, that. Why do people buy anything in the world? Bingo. Say it again.
They think that it will make them feel good.
Good feelings. Anything. I'm talking like a tombstone for someone, because it's the last thing they can do. Anything that you buy in life, typically, is you're buying good feelings. When you really break it down, that is like the fundamental core of consumer psychology, of how do we get people to feel good. And it's the same thing with philanthropy. When they're investing in philanthropy, right, they are investing in a good feeling. By the way, some people give to philanthropy for a tax break, or they give to philanthropy because they want to be a part of an elite social circle. I'm not judging that intention. I think that's all, they're still giving to philanthropy. It's not my place to judge their intention and their motive for giving. They're still feeling good. Most people give because there's this like altruistic sense of, you know, I want to do good in the world. But do not mistake that it's the same thing. So if we have that comfort, right, with telling people they should invest because they're going to feel good and enjoy it, why are we not showing up in the same way when we're talking about these unbelievable causes that are, P.S., changing lives? Why are we shutting down? And I think we really need to lean into that. And oh my God, it was so my turn before hers. I can't even say it now without feeling self-conscious. Do you know what I'm talking about? The book Leaning In? All right. Anyway, so this is really fundamental and really, really core stuff. That when you are, Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook wrote a book called Leaning In. And it was like my phrase before she created this bestseller book. And so now every time I say it, I'm very self-conscious. Can we take that off the tape? Because that's not necessary. Okay, so last thing I want to say about this before moving on is that what I'm really trying to get out here is how do we change the language and thinking about extending people in opportunity. Is that the distinction, what's the distinction between making a request and making an offer? And it's a really important distinction. Think about it in other walks of life. When we ask people to join our boards and join our committees, it's almost always a request. As a matter of fact, it's almost often a beg, right? We're requesting them to do something for us. But what would it look like if we offered them a seat at the table? If we offered them the opportunity to serve? How might that change their participation in how they show up? Because we're making an offer, right? It's kind of like, do you request a raise at work, or do you offer to stay with the company if you're paid more money? It shifts. It shifts the dynamic and shifts the conversation. Language is generative. We create with our words. And we have to really notice how we're talking about this practice. The way that we've been talking about this practice has not served us up until now. And the biggest disservice has been in this word. Now, in Montreal, they call it canvasser. In Canada, they call it canvasser. What is the Hebrew word that they're calling for, like, legayes kesef? Yeah, not like a terribly sexy term. No, not wearing a t-shirt saying that. Okay, so also we'll say in all my travels, like I've never had someone wear, like, I'm a proud Hillel solicitor, like no t-shirt, no cap, no visor, never. Because it's a heinous word. And just for you whose English is not your first language, solicitation or solicitor is actually another word for prostitution. right? So here I am talking about like elevating the sacredness and the holiness and, you know, and the language of fundraising, and in a way I'm calling it prostitution. So what I'm saying is, and we use this language and we've perpetuated this language, and I'm saying, let's bag the word. All right, we're gonna bag the word. Let's really call this what it is, and let's find an identity that each one of you could really wrap your mind and heart around and that you could really embody. So in Washington, I live in Washington, D.C., we don't call it solicitor training, we call it ambassador training. You know, it works in Washington, the embassies, it's very international, right? But because we want to articulate that an ambassador embodies so much more, that you are ambassadoring, I don't know if it's a verb, right, on behalf of the organization. And that includes collecting money and articulating a compelling case and inviting people in. Like, it just encompasses and encapsulates so much more than just a financial transaction. So we call it ambassador. All right, what? Of some other words, something that you can relate to. A solicitor is a what?
Is that a position like an organization?
It's not a professional position, but that's what we call our volunteers, okay. Right? So, although, yes, it's funny. I had recently run into someone who had a job description in an NGO called, their title was Ambassador of Meaning. And I was like, wow, that's so cool and so weird at the same time, right? Okay, so let's think of some other words. What's other language? What can you use?
Representative.
Love it. Representative. What else? Advisor. Keep going.
Change agent.
Just gonna fall over. A change agent. Great. What else? There's so many more. Like, what could you?
Partnerships.
A what?
Partnerships manager. Partnerships relationships.
Love it. Even just partner. What else?
Coach.
Love.
Advocate.
Perfect. I'm thinking of some words. I'll help you. They begin with an E and end with an R.
Energizer.
Great. Not what I was thinking. But I love it. All right. Energizer. It's like a Mad Lib. Come on.
Project manager.
Okay. Great.
Educator.
There you go. All right. I know. Not like I'm competitive or anything, but okay. Educator. What else? I'm gonna give you some more. An enabler, but like a good kind of enabler. It can have a negative connotation, but like you're enabling someone, right? Opportunity provider, etc. Shaliach.
Salesman.
Salesman. Great. If you connect to that, that's awesome. What else?
Entrepreneur is another.
Love it. By the way, I have in my bio, it has all of my academic accolades because I can't spell. So I just need to like establish some intellectual credibility with you before I misspell everything. I just want to be transparent about that. So I'm going to abbreviate this since I'm not quite sure of the spelling. Great. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so what else? I'll tell you my favorite one that I heard out there. I think I heard it in Detroit. Seductress. I'd wear that sweatshirt. Like tzedakah, like seductress. Do you know what a seductress is? Like someone who. Let's talk later. Okay. So I'm gonna explain the whole thing to you. So here are the other two that I would use. A solicitor is a connector, right? I think that. And then finally, the biggest one that I'd love you to consider is a solicitor as a matchmaker. Because here's the thing. If I were just a matchmaker, a shadchanit, right? Which is different from who's the kosher butcher, the shadchan? Shochet. I've messed that up before and it hasn't gone well. Yeah, I just want to name that. Okay, so because the reason why I put these last two is if I were given 2 minutes to do this master class with you, this is the only thing I would say. You have this person and who this person is and all that they care about and all their complexities and their narrative, and then you have this product, like in all of its glory and what it is, okay? And your job is to actually make a match between this person and this cause, all right? And here's the thing, like we make matches all the time. We love making matches. It doesn't cost us anything, and we just make people happy. Like we put people and people together and make matches. We put people and institutions together. We make matches all the time. Why is this any different? And I'll tell you why it's different. because we have inextricably linked our failure or our success to what the other person says. If they give, we're awesome. If they don't, we suck. Like, we just have linked too much the outcome to our own sense of self-worth. And it's not serving us, because we are truly there as a vehicle for making a philanthropic match. So all of this intro is to say to you, how are you showing up? How are you showing up in this? This is like the fundamental coaching question that I work on with people. Are you showing up here? Are you showing up here? What's your headspace? What's that tape running in your head? What's holding you back? What would it take for each one of you to say, I'm showing up in this to offer someone an opportunity to get in a really big game and to invest in something that has a huge return on investment and that is like transforming our world. And you know what? I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm just here to extend the offer. What's that going to take for each one of you to really embody that and take that on? Because I promise you, if that shift doesn't happen, you're always going to feel that discomfort. You can just decide to think about this differently. You can just decide. You can just decide right now, and that's it. You can make that decision. It's up to you to make that decision. Thoughts, questions before I go on? Challenges? You're with me. Yeah.
Very quickly, something I heard recently, the word Vedananu, and we will give. Backwards is the same, and we will receive. It's just a cute idea. And giving, you receive that.
I love it.
Cool.
I'm going to use it. Do I quote you or like the Bible? Okay. All right, fine. Okay. So I just want to get sort of a scan in the room and get a sense of, all right, when you see this beautiful picture, where are you? So I want you to tell me right now, where are you in this picture in your life as a fundraiser? Like, are you like treading water and drowning? Are you on the ascent? Are you in the pot of gold? Like, just take a minute, place yourself in this picture for me in your life as a fundraiser. Just where you are now. Yeah.
Climbing the second mountain out of the three.
This one or this one?
It's the first one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. Where else? Where are you guys?
It has a bottom of the lake.
You what?
It has a picture of the bottom of the lake.
Oh.
Trying to swim.
You're like a sea urchin, right? Okay. Good. Where else? Yeah.
I feel like I'm like taking the picture, I'm like watching it, but I'm not in it.
Oh, that's really interesting. You're like behind the lens. Mm-hmm. That's very honest. Yeah.
I think I'm in the grass.
Tell me about the grass. How's it feeling?
It feels like there's a huge climb that I don't feel that I'm capable of.
Right, so you're like comfortable on this level, steady earth. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I definitely feel like I'm wading in the water, but I don't feel like getting to the top. Like, I see getting to the top, but I'm still wading in the water.
You're like on the raft, getting some sun. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure.
Like I'm putting my legs on the lake. It has potential, but I'm not sure whether it will go there or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I see the rainbow, and I feel the same. The rainbow disappears one day and comes again. So like many ups and downs.
Yeah. Yeah.
One successful day, one day.
Yeah. What else?
Actually, you can see it, but behind the first one, there's a chairlift. And well, I'm on the first stage because I met the Schusterman and he kind of helped me on the first mountain, and so I'm looking up to the sea, both of the second peaks.
But you're definitely getting a lift.
A lift, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Love it. Yeah.
I feel like I just climbed the first hill and it was really hard, and then I'm like, oh shit, there's 2 more hills.
Yeah. You're like, seriously?
And those are like way bigger, but like the reward is better. So.
You know, it reminds me of, on my bucket list in my life was running a marathon, which I did before I had kids, like 10 years ago. And I was given a lot of wisdom and advice before running a marathon that I think really relates to fundraising. And one of them, one of the pieces that I got that I use like every day of my life is never make a decision on a hill. Like never, and I use it as a metaphor in life, like never make a decision on an incline. Because if you're in the middle of that hill, like you will always make the wrong decision, right? And this happened to me. I ran a 10 miler a few months ago, and I haven't run 10 miles since I ran the marathon 10 years ago. So around mile or 4, I was like, does anyone know where the metro is? Like, this was really nice, but I'm going home. I mean, I just like literally mile 4, I was on the mall, Washington, D.C., looking for the metro. And then I remembered, never make a decision on the hill. Like, I just need to like get my bearings and get grounded and get clear before deciding what to do. So I actually stopped for a minute, like I stopped to actually breathe, and then someone handed me a bag of these like runner's jelly beans. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're like shots. What?
Shot box.
I don't know what they are, but they're jelly beans and they're for runners. And they're like, yeah, just if you take one at every mile, you'll make it. So I'm like, okay. I just, I was like, okay, I'll do that. Ate the whole bag. Done. Yeah, I mean, 10 miles, like later, just like, I was like, 10 miles, come on, let's go for 20. I don't know, there was something in those jelly beans. I think it might have been crack, but I'm just saying it was really amazing. But it was that notion of like, it's the same thing as for fundraising, right? Like when you're in that conversation and someone maybe brings up resistance or brings up an issue, right? And it's like fight or flight, you just want to like shut down or feel like, this is now getting really hard. It's like you have to stop and recenter and go back to that notion of presence and showing up and what are you really here to do, right? To be able to move you through to that next place. So you can use any picture, any visual for this, but it's nice sometimes to just put it in front of the people that you work with and really ask them to place themselves in this and where they think they are. So I want to move us more into the kind of talkless piece of how to and what's happening with this. Great. So the first thing I have here is prepare yourself. And what do I mean by this? So number 1, rule of fundraising, right? The very first thing you have to do before you ask anyone for money is what?
Give yourself.
Great. That's exactly right. It's very basic. Cannot ask anyone else for a gift unless you've given yourself. All right? Right. So walk the talk. To be prepared to talk about that gift, not necessarily the dollar amount, but mostly, so it is for walk the talk and for credibility, but from my perspective, like the technical aspect is so that you can authentically use the correct language of fundraising, which is, Gary, please join me. So it's not, Gary, you need to, or Gary, you must, or you have to, or you ought to. It's, Gary, please consider joining me. So that is in terms of like, there's lots of flexibility in the way that you approach fundraising, but the correct language of fundraising is, please join me. You know, I always think about, on airplanes, like when the emergency procedures videos come on, or when the flight attendants show you what to do in case of an emergency. I know, I think about campaign a lot, it's a little weird. But anyway, like, so what do you do in case of an emergency? What happens? Your mask comes down, and what do you do?
Put your mask first and then assist small children.
Yeah, and like, it's like cognitive dissonance. Like, really? You know, my plane's going down, and I'm gonna put it on myself before assisting my small child. Like, everything about it feels wrong. And instead, that metaphor is around, you can't assist or help or transmit unless you are grounded and filled and okay to really be able to assist. And I love that metaphor for campaign, that like if we are going to try and transmit this or invite people or extend it, we need to make sure that we're full and that we can credibly and authentically say to people, join me. All right, so that's like first rule of thumb, do not pass go. A lot of people ask me at this point the question of, does the amount of the asker have to match the amount of the giver? All right? There is a big strategy that should be put in place when you're thinking about matching the asker to the donor. It's not just like a random, that's a match in itself. I am a believer that on the one hand, should a $50,000 donor be asking a $50,000 donor? And my answer is, what do you think my answer is going to be? No. Not going to be my answer? No. But it was good. It was a good guess. It is sort of a no, but my answer, I'm actually cheating because you're not going to get the answer. So the answer is it depends. Oh. Which is going to be my answer to most fundraising questions you ask me. It depends. So it's yes and no, and it depends. So in many cases, yes, it's going to be, you want someone at that level asking someone at that level. But many times you want to be really thoughtful and strategic of giving this person and this donor and where they are in their giving life. Who's the person do I want to put in front of them? Should it be a recipient? Should it be a beneficiary? Should it be, someone who can tell the story with someone else? Should it be someone who has a huge amount of cachet and gravitas in the community? Should it be a famous person? To really be thoughtful around what's the best person to open the door to build this relationship and to really think about that. So for example, we have had, and it's a whole separate story, but we've had just this resurgence of life for our young adults in Washington through this program called the Birthright Alumni Leadership Mission, which Lana was a participant of. And it's a very long story made short, but in short, we have these 75 young, hip, amazingly cool people in Washington who now are deeply in love with Federation. And we are starting to put these 20 and early 30-somethings in front of our biggest donors. So maybe that 25-year-old is giving $365, $1 a day, and we are putting them in front of a $75,000 donor. Why? Tell me why.
Because this $1 means a lot much for this person than 100,000 to 75,000.
Good. Why else? Good.
Because young people make more mature people feel good.
They see their own life. They see what the future does.
Yeah. You got it. All of that. But let's talk about that a little bit more. These $75,000 donors who have built this community, who have built it, they are the elders, they are they are it, and they are worried. They're worried about what's going to happen after their time has passed. And they're tired. They're tired of carrying the community. Now you're putting this young gun in front of them who's like, I don't know what the Federation, or I don't know what this thing is, but I live for it. A totally unscripted, unplugged young person, and you're having this donor be like, okay, I get it. This is why I've been doing this, and it's going to be okay, and it's going to be good. That's a strategic decision. It doesn't have to be matched by age or even level of donation. You have to think about the intention and how you want that donor to feel, and then you create that right match. Does that make sense? Okay. So, next thing here, prepare yourself to give your own gift. Next thing, know the donor. All right? What are all the things that you want to know about your donors before you meet with them? What do you want to know about them? Great. Okay, so that was really good because usually people shout out things and they say yes, 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 and then we get to the real answer, which is everything. As much as you can know, so you saved us a lot of time, as much as you can know about the person before you meet is really powerful. Why? Not because you're trying to be a stalker or a harasser, but it helps you in preparing. It helps you in preparing the case that you're making. So, Ruel, how do I say your name?
Yep.
Ruel. So, if I know that Ruel has a particular affinity for the arts, now I'm thinking about my organization, and I can now prepare and kind of casting the light on my organization that really accentuates the arts or really deals directly with the arts. So it helps me to prepare in thinking about that conversation because I already have a sense of where this person gives or what they're interested in. So anything you can know about that person is great. Where have they given in the past? What are they interested in? How are they connected to the organization? Where's their place in the community? What do they do professionally? What do they do philanthropically? You just want to create a picture of that person so then you can be strategizing points of entry of what they might be actually interested in. How do you find this out? How do you find this information out? Internet stalking, we'll talk about that. What else?
Past
Friends.
Past donation.
Past donations. What else?
Talking to people.
Yeah, you got it. So a lot of it, there'll be history within the organization, but for many of you, you're dealing more with startups. Right? You're dealing more with startup organizations. You don't have a lot of institutional memory or history. So you might say, well, in my community, I could talk to some of the other charities, or I could talk to the Federation, or I could, I'm not sure exactly, in Israel you wouldn't necessarily go to the Sachnut or anything like that. You could talk to other organizations, but it's a little tricky with competitiveness and people not wanting to give out names. So the best way that you can learn about people who this might be relevant for is, we used to call it Rolodexing. We don't really have Rolodexes anymore. Half of you are like, I don't know what a Rolodex is. Now you know how old I am. Anyway, it's about using your networks and your social capital to figure it out. There's only one problem. You have to make sure if you're going to be engaging in that conversation about others, you have to, someone needs to play like Lashon Hara police. Like it has to be elevated discourse around people and what they care about, not like this one drives this car and this one does, like you can't get into that level of conversation because it's just not right. And it's just not like, it's not holy conversation. So if you're sitting around a table with people trying to figure out who potentially has resources, just make sure that you're setting the bar for like elevated discourse around this, okay? Let's talk about internet stalking. So, yeah.
Finding a mentor who's been working in fundraising for the last 20 years and knows the community, knows the donors, have their meetings once every 2 months.
Amazing. Like, perfect. And people want to help in that way. It also means that every time you ask for someone, and we'll talk about this in a minute, every time you ask someone for money, you're actually asking them for two things. You're asking them for a financial contribution, and you're asking them for a potential name of someone else you can talk to who this might resonate for. That's called a double ask. Now, sometimes a double ask is, I'm asking your contribution, and I'm also asking for you to ask someone else, right? But I definitely am into the double ask. One is a financial contribution, and one is more of how do we create more of a ripple effect here, okay? Internet. Guys, really important. If you're gonna look up, if you're gonna research people online, it needs to color the conversation, not inform and shape the conversation. Here's the distinction. When someone calls me and says, how did your conference go in LA last week? Or, oh, your daughter just broke her leg, how's she doing? I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. I can't. Like, we are so public, right? And we make those choices to be public. I am on Facebook. I make those choices to be public, but it's so invasive when someone starts right, and it feels like, it does feel stalkish. So if someone is learning that about me and understands that I have 4 little kids and that I travel a lot for work, or that like I'm a competitive athlete, or whatever it is. So if they know that about me as a way to prep and think about how they want to cast the light on the organization, I think that's smart. I think that's really, really smart. But there's a distinction, like I'm drawn to that because they've spent the time to try and understand me. But if they're kind of putting it in my face in that way, I shut down. Do you see that distinction? It's color, right? It informs. That's a bit about the donor. Okay, and then my favorite piece here is knowing your product. And we could spend hours and hours on this, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a minute on a piece of paper, and I want you to describe the organization you're currently representing. Either you're volunteering for them or you're working for them. I want you to describe that organization in one sentence. Preferably not a run-on, but try and do it in one sentence. Go ahead. If someone said, describe for me the organization in one sentence, how would you write it? Who has an example for me? Yes.
I think that they took it from our office hours, and I liked it very much, your advice. So I think it can be remembering the past and building for the future.
Beautiful. Thank you. Who else has an example of how to explain the organization? Yes.
Mine's much longer.
Great.
Mishkan is an independent, young spiritual community in Chicago whose mission is to engage, educate, connect, and inspire people through dynamic experiences of worship, prayer, and community building.
Beautiful. Thank you. Who else? Yeah.
You use the power of soccer and the hero of the sports to create, educate, inspire, and mobilize you to make the right choices in life.
Anyone else? If you say it in Hebrew and you say it slowly, I can totally translate it. Sort of. Yeah.
It's introducing young adults to Jewish culture and Jerusalem.
What's the name of your organization?
Jerusalem Secular Yeshiva.
Oh, okay. Yossi Summit. We need to talk about him. Okay. Yeah.
1% Foundation is building next generation of feminists.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
A radio show that brings wonderful stories of Israelis who never get heard.
Michelle, leading Israel's efforts to improve the lives of the world.
And with that accent, you could say anything. Just keep talking, girl. Just keep talking. Okay. Good. All right. So here's what I want you to do. Step 2. And again, these are the exercises that you have to do with your staff. You have to do with your volunteers. They're so basic and so profound at the same time. Next step. I want you to think really quickly, and we're gonna whip around, starting with Michael. No analysis paralysis. I want this to like come from the gut. If you had described your organization in one word and one word only, what would it be?
Future. Leadership.
Health.
Judaism.
Sustainability. Community. Philanthropy.
Activism. Bridging. Community.
Change.
Pluralism. Entrepreneurship.
Community.
Stories.
Nature.
Stories.
Engaging. Opportunity. Rebranding.
Youth empowerment.
Dash.
Good word.
Oh, sorry.
I'll give you a dash. Keep going.
Save motherhood.
What was it?
Save motherhood.
Dash.
Experiences.
Connection.
Okay. So here's the trick. How many of you had your one word and your one sentence? Raise your hands high. One word and one sentence. That is really, really good. I mean, really good. You kind of blew my point, but that was really, really, really good. It's not like I kind of don't like you right now, but it was really good. Because most people, it's not. And here's what I want to say, why this is so good. Because this room already, I know, is so, and I don't know if it's an age thing or what, but there's such alignment between like mission and description. So most people will sort of say, you know, the Jewish Community Center of Northern Virginia is a center for blah, blah, blah. And then when I ask them for their one word and they're like soul saving or whatever, it's nowhere to be found, right? It's nowhere to be found in that description because we get all like buttoned up. No, the audio's gotta match the video. There has to be alignment. If that is your one word, then that word needs to be in your one sentence, in your one paragraph, in your opening pitch. Like that's your word. That word has to be everywhere. It has to be central and core to what you're doing. So again, it's just noticing that language. How are you talking about your organization? How are you talking about it with donors? Are you creating more formal language because you think that's gonna land, right? Is it, the language has to be you. It has to be an extension. It's your articulation and your expression. It's not about like stepping into my fundraising, putting my cape on and here I go. It's just you. Right? So, for example, we'll talk about this in a minute, but my big opening question, like my big powerful opening question when I raise money is I sit down with people and I say, so like, what's your thing? Me, I'm obsessed with language. Like I teach people how to talk and my question is, what's your thing? It's ridiculous. I sound like a third grader, but that's my thing. Like that's how I talk. I'm like, that's Rae Ringel. Like I don't put on my cape and I don't get into a character. This is just, maybe I talk louder or softer, but it's just me. I'm showing up in this. So if that word is very central and really captures the essence of what this work is, it has to be everywhere. All right? Last piece of this exercise on product. I want you to think for a minute about 5 ways that your organization helps people. And I want you to think out of the box on this. So for example, when I do this with day schools, with educational institutions, they're not allowed to say how that school helps kids or parents. Not allowed. You have to think about all the other people in the world. I want you to really try and think expansively about not just your usual suspects, like not just the kids playing soccer on the field, right, or maybe even their families. I want you to think much more globally about all the people who are impacted by your organization existing. Try and think of 5 ways. Give it a minute. Okay, anyone thought of one that like wasn't maybe a usual suspect or something different they hadn't considered before? Who are you helping? Let's hear it. Yeah.
I wrote an entertaining.
You wrote what?
I wrote entertaining, like we entertain people by doing excursions around the things that are left from the Judaism and showing the fun stuff and talking about people and doing the exhibitions.
Okay, good. Thank you. Who else? Yeah.
A sense of belonging.
To who?
Well, so there are two parts of my organization, and one is for Orthodox Jews and one is for Jewish environmentalists. But in both cases, those people might feel alone, but we create spaces where they feel together with others like them.
So now a byproduct of something that's about like green and environmentalism might also have this building community and creating relationships factor.
Right.
Like, so you might not have to even be so greenish to be able to be engaged in this. Or you should be both. Or we're moving on. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that the opportunity, so there are people who might feel like they're alone because of who they are, find other people who are like them, and then they have a sense of belonging, like, oh, here's my community, I see that I fit with these people.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
So I work for a maternal health organization. We talk a lot about the women and mothers and their experience, but a byproduct of what we're doing is actually affecting the men's experience, getting them involved in the process. When women come home, they have a better, more dignified experience, and everyone else gets engaged.
You got it. Bingo. Who else? Yes.
The value of being soft, something that I think that our leadership program, because we're working with military and getting dismissed out of the army, they're very rigid and they think like it's only physics, technology, and math. So we're teaching them how to be soft and the value and the benefits together.
Beautiful.
So it's maybe not as global because it's still their participants, but I think when people think about what I do or what we do at Chicago Run, they mainly focus on combating childhood obesity and the health and wellness factor. But I think the big thing is really letting kids feel that they can like set ambitious goals in this confidence setting. So creating future leaders who feel really good about themselves.
You got it. Okay, so this is a really great example because now we could have myopia, right? And just think the people who care about this organization are people who are committed to fighting childhood obesity, right? But now she's just expanded the definition, not only to anyone who cares about like health and fitness, right? But think about like next generation of leadership, of teaching people how to make empowered, good choices at a young age, now has more like a global civic society implication. So you go from here to here. See what I'm saying? Other examples? Yeah.
So usually when I talk about education, I talk about like inspiring individuals to give, but I think maybe there's also something about creating a culture of giving, like changing the meaning of philanthropy as like a person, and also like a level of civic engagement, so empowering communities also.
Great, good. So this is probably the most important exercise that you can take back with you. And just to highlight an experience in the States when I work with a lot of schools, they tend to think that the only people you can raise money from in Jewish day schools are parents who are sending their kids there. But guess what? That's your most tapped out donor because they're paying anywhere between $20,000 and $80,000 a year for their kids to go to school, and that's your primary source for funding. But then they said, well, what if you're not sending your child to a Jewish day school? How can you raise money from someone? They've chosen to send their kids to public school or whatever it is. And I think, well, what if you thought about that school as a Jewish communal institution or a Jewish leadership institution or if you think about all the programs they do to build community and visiting the elders and social action, like you're so narrow in your definition of who your school is serving that if you can expand that definition of all the people who are touched by this institution, you've just broadened your donor base many-fold. But we get caught in our own myopia, right? Of thinking that we're only serving people who are enrolled today or doing today and not thinking about the long-term implications of who we serve and the values that our organizations hold that could resonate for a huge range of people. Every single person I've met with in office hours, and don't tell anyone this, but every single person I've met with so far, like I just want to give all my money to, right? Whether it's aligned with my values or not, because each person has shown me how like what I care about in the world is parked in their I have some of you in the room. Don't you dare ask me for money after this. I'm just being honest. So, right, but because you've shown me how what I care about in the world actually lives in your organization, even though I would think like I am a mother, but maternal health in Rwanda is not necessarily something that like, oh, I wake up in the morning and I want to like support mothers in Rwanda. That's not, right? But I now know in a conversation that my core values are aligned with the core values of this organization. I could be a potential donor, even though seemingly there's not a connection there. It depends on how you are telling the story and the narrative of your product in a way that many people can resonate. You know, it can resonate for many, many people. Questions? Okay.
Just a statement.
Yes.
You're amazing. This is
So nice. So that's really nice. But in that spirit. So here's the thing. So we have about 25 minutes left. You know what they say in Hebrew, like die, consume, right? Okay. Anyway, no, stop going. Okay. So we have a lot of options here, and it's very overwhelming because I have so many things that I want to do with you. We could kind of do Q&A, although I feel like we've been doing Q&A throughout. And there's two paths I could go with you. There's that sort of technical, how do you call someone up and ask them for money, and if they have an objection, we could do that. Or I have 2 or 3 skills that I think are like essential for every fundraiser to have that I want us to practice. Now I sort of tipped the balance because I think you know where I want to go with this. But do you guys have a preference to 1 or 2?
2.
Great. I hope that wasn't leading at all because that's really where I wanted to go. And to also tell you that we just don't have enough time to do all those like topless fundraising things, but I'm going to make an offer to you about, I'm going to tell you at the end how you can learn more and think about like sharpening your tools. So I want to take you through, I'm going to take you through my 8-month course at faculty on faculty at Georgetown where I train coaches. And I'm going to give you the best of. And here's how we're going to start. We're going to start with the slide that talks about questions. Okay? Questions is the core of coaching. Questions are at the core of fundraising. Your ability to be a great questioner has a deep impact on being a successful fundraiser, to show up in that spirit of curiosity. Okay? So I'm going to give you a hint, and then we're going to do a brief exercise to practice this. Questions that you want to ask people, in general, great questions start with the word what. Your best questions are typically going to start with the word what. Let me explain. Here are the questions that begin with why. So I'm going to say, Yehuda, why did you do that? What do you hear when I say that? Why did you do that? Totally benign question. I want to know why he did that. Automatically going to put him on his heels. He has to defend or justify, right? How could I change that why did you do that into a what question?
What made you do that?
What made you do that?
What inspired you to it?
What inspired you? What compelled you? What motivated you? As my husband says, what the hell were you thinking? Don't you tell me. Anyway, right, so more generative what questions, okay? Even why do you give? Why do you give when you want to know why someone gives? They have to sort of explain or go back or justify. That puts us in the language of the past as opposed to what compels you or what motivates you or what inspires you to give. So I did this fascinating experiment in LA a while back where there was a group of like 50 men from the real estate division there. And their task after they talked about their real estate deals was they had to go around and answer the question, why do you give? And each guy got up and just told the most amazing stories about his grandfather taught him this, or they were raised with this, or this is what they learned. And these beautiful, beautiful, emotional stories. And so we stopped at the halfway mark to give people a break. And when they came back into the room, I cheated. And I said, okay, guys, we have our second half of the room to go. Just remember the question, what compels you to give? Right? And what do you think happened? It's unbelievable. The legacy they want to leave, what they want to teach their children, what they want to do in this world, what they hope to create. It was like a conversation from the past and the future. And all beautiful and great and important, but the shift in language totally shifted where the conversation went. Okay, so in general, even when someone comes to meet me in fundraising, right, and I don't know them at all, my first statement that I want to say is, Ethan, why did you decide to meet with me today? Right? As opposed to, Ethan, like, what made you decide, or sort of what compelled you, or what motivated you to come to this meeting? There's got to be a story there. You didn't come because you had nothing better to do. I'm really curious about that. Whereas, why did you decide? I now have to explain to you, like, what went into my decision making, right? And it doesn't mean all why questions are bad, but it's just something I want you to notice when thinking about questions and language. That why questions, even without that intention necessarily, will tend to put people on their heels to have to go back and explain. Think about the what. All right? I'm going to come back to that. So, great opening questions to fundraising is, what compels you to give, or what's your thing, or what's the thing that you really care about, or when have you had positive experiences giving to philanthropy? I want to learn more about that. Or, any sort of question to really get people talking, you're engaging them and bringing them in.
At what point in a conversation, sitting down with somebody who you know minimally, do you get to that question? Because I could imagine that actually being a wonderful get to know you question,
Yeah.
but it could also seem very forward.
Yeah. So, right, so I wouldn't, like, at Starbucks, when they sit down with their latte, be like, what's your motivation to giving? Like, there is that sort of natural sense of getting to know someone and asking questions. And in terms, it's a good question in terms of the fundraising piece. What happens to people is sometimes if they have a half an hour meeting, they spend 28 minutes like on the schmoozing and getting to know you, and then they have to downshift in the last 2 minutes to making a financial ask. So what I like to do to combat that is say, listen, I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to meet today and to talk about how you might be involved or how you might make a contribution to our cause. Before we even get there, I'd love to, get to know you better and hear kind of where you are and what you're looking for. And so I name it. As a matter of fact, and I should say this before, is if you are going to meet with someone in person to ask them for money or to talk about a contribution, you have to tell them before you meet. In other words, when you're calling someone to make the meeting, it's not, I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee.
You're setting the expectation.
You have to set the expectation, because if you're inviting someone for coffee and then you ask them for money, they feel blindsided and they feel manipulated. Now, that doesn't mean I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee where I'm going to ask you for $5,000. They're not coming to coffee, right? So it's like that balance of, I want to talk to you about the work we're doing, your involvement, our campaign strategy, like to just sort of let them know that there's intention to this conversation without necessarily rolling it out, because then why not just talk about it on the phone? Why meet for coffee? Right? So I think it is that really using your intuition around that sense of getting to know someone and also shaping the conversation with intention. And just being curious. Being really curious about who's this person in front of me and what do they care about. So I just want to tell you a quick story to transition into our next section about listening. I do a lot of fundraising on behalf of the Jewish Federation system in North America. It's like my huge passion. It's my major philanthropy. And I've always had this thing. I used to work for the Federation system that anyone can tell me anything they care about in the world, and I'm going to tell you how like Federation touches it in some way. Like it's the best thing. Like try me. It's like this. It's like this game. So I've been talking this big game for years and years and years, and I had the opportunity last year. It was the hardest ask I ever had with a guy named Lee. Didn't know that much about him, but he agreed to meet with me. So of course I'm wondering what compelled him to meet with me. And then we chit-chatting a little bit. I said, Lee, I don't know that much about you. What I'm really curious about here is, what's your thing? What's my thing, right? So and he looks at me and he said, my thing is the rescue of Irish setters. And I thought, oh my God, I'm out. The rescue of Irish setters. So at first I'm like, what's an Irish setter, right? And then I'm like, a dog. And I thought, I'm out. Like, I've been talking this game for 20 years. I got nothing. Like, I'm a fraud. I'm a failure in the world. And I am in full panic mode. So I'm going through my card catalog of stray dogs in Israel, canines for the blind, dogs in Russia. I'm just racking my brain about how, because I'm the one who said the Federation does everything. And this guy just blew my cover, right? So, if I know nothing else about this guy, what do I know? that he loves animals. What else do I know?
He met with you.
What?
He met with me, yeah.
He met with me. What else do I know? What did he say? What's the word he used?
Rescue.
Bingo. You want to talk Federation and rescue? I hope you have a week. Because I could talk like global rescuing communities. I can talk like Sophia in isolation and the JCC hot lunch. Like, I hope you have a lot of time. Right? So here I have this like seemingly slam door with dogs, which I do not have one of, right? But when thinking about that, like total locked and loaded listening and presence, to be able to really hear that word and understand that there might be something there, that there might be an inherent value around rescue that could be aligned. And that is about being super duper present with people. Okay? So here's what I want you to do. I want to turn to your partner for a minute. And just, you can turn to the person next to you. And this is going to be tricky because it was like so 3 or 4 days ago and so much has happened. But all I want you to do is pick a person A and pick a person B. And I want person A to tell person B every single thing you did last weekend. No commentary back from person B. Just like rattle through, tell them what you did last weekend as much as you can remember. Okay? Go. Okay, stop. Good, good. Okay. Person B, it's your turn. I want you to tell person A every single thing that they just told you. Okay, person A, how did they do?
Awesome.
Awesome? Yeah? Good? Great. Okay, that's really good. And I think, by the way, we're in an environment that really fosters this. But listening is a major tool in direct communication. Listening and questioning, in my opinion, asking questions and being a great listener is the, tied at the top, #1 skill and tool that you need to be a successful fundraiser. And all you really need for that is a hell of a lot of curiosity and presence, which is great, which is what I said from the beginning of this class, that everything you need to succeed in this, you already have. It's about bringing it forward. Okay? Love this cartoon, if you get it, with Mr. Potato Head. Not that it relates to any of our lives, but okay. So, great. So I want to just introduce you. I know, wait a minute. I want to just introduce you to this concept, okay? Most of us, this comes out of leadership coaching methodology. So most of us are listening in general at level 1. Okay? What does level 1 listening mean? So level 1 listening is typically all about me. How do you know that you're in level 1 listening? Is it Mishi? Yeah. So Mishi, we meet and we're talking, and within 3 seconds, I have no idea what your name is. You've just told me your name and I have no idea why. I'm looking at your amazing hair and your glasses, and I'm like, I have all these assessments and all these things, and I'm just listening around like, do I agree with you? Do I disagree with you? Do I connect? Do I not connect? Do I relate? Do I not relate? It's all about how I'm receiving this information, right? And what I'm doing with it. So I'm not, I'm listening, but it's all about me, and I don't mean in a selfish way. It's just we are meaning-making machines. We're always making meaning. So it's just like how you listen to someone or they say their name, and you absolutely have no idea, because we're just in that mode of how it relates to us. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. This is very much how we need to operate at work. at level 1, because when people are communicating to us at work, we have to think about how it has an impact on what we do next or what we need to, like, this is a good way of listening. But we have to understand that it's very limited because it's really only measuring our reaction and the impact that it has on us. The second level of listening is what I call level 2. Level 2 is getting much more focused on the other person. You're still kind of having your own internal chatter, but you're starting to notice more body language, expression, you're leaning in a bit more, you're starting to get a sense of what's really going on for this person. You're still sort of wondering how it relates to you, but you're much more locked and loaded on this person. I actually think that at level 2, this is where I want my fundraisers to be, right? I'm gonna come back to this in a minute. Level 3, drop down a level. This is what we train coaches on. What level 3 listening is, I call it escape to the movies. I go to the movies, and by the way, I only go to movies that have happy endings because I don't want to pay money to be disappointed. I just want to reveal that to all of you. It's a whole other psychological discussion. So I go to the movies because there's dark lights and there's popcorn, and I can absolutely lose myself in someone else's story. Like, I don't even exist anymore because I'm so taken in this person's narrative and in their story that I get to like leave my life and be in someone else's life. This is what I need to do as a coach. I need to quiet my own story and my own assessments to be truly present for someone else and not only hear what they're saying, but it's like you're hearing the headline, but I'm really understanding what's not being said and what's really going on here. Like, you start hearing the underneath part of what's happening. You're starting to yes, it's true empathy, where it's like you let go of any outcome or an agenda. And my challenge as a coach between level 2 and level 3 is, in level 2, I'm listening to the person, but I'm also thinking about that next great question. At level 3, I am so there that, like, when the person's done talking, I have to stop and pause and then think about what I want to ask, because all that noise in my head is quieted to really be there. And you know when you're in that conversation with someone. Now, you can't be on that level every single day. It's not sustainable. You can't be like, at lunch with someone at work and be like, so when your mother took away your blanket, it's just not, it's not sustainable for the long term. But to just notice that when you're in a fundraising conversation, you can choose to be here. You can choose to let go of the number that's in your head or the donation to just be curious and hear someone else's story. Where I typically have fundraisers live is in level 2. What does this mean? So I'm having this conversation with Danielle. So we're having this conversation, we're talking, and I'm listening to you. But as Danielle's saying things, I'm also kind of up in the balcony thinking, oh, she just said this, I should talk about this, or tell her this story, or my card catalog's going of which story I'm going to pull down because I think it's going to resonate for Danielle. And that's good, because I want to be here, but I also want to be in sort of a bigger conversation around how I'm going to make that connection. This is awesome for dating. Daters in the room? Anyone? So me, Upper West Side of New York, dating. We're talking, and here I am. I could never marry someone who eats like that. Or like, how fast can I get in my pajamas? So or I'm gonna marry this person, whatever it is, okay? So you're here and you're connecting, but you're also like sort of processing in it. None of these are bad or good. You just call upon them for different situations. So I want you guys to think about dropping down here as askers and being able to really listen to what's being said and maybe what's not being said, so that you can better make that match between this person's values, going right back to here. So we're going to do that exercise one more time. And I want now person 2 to have the opportunity to tell person 1 every single thing you did last weekend. Go ahead. Okay, stop. Okay, so if you are my listener, you know the drill, although you know I'm going to change it. So listener, I now want you to tell your speaker, based on what you heard, what are you knowing about them? What are you knowing? What are you knowing about them based on what they've just told you? What are you knowing? Okay, stop. All right, guys, how did our listeners do? Tell me a little about it. What happened?
Yvonne's amazing. She's a psychic.
Psychic. Boom. All right, or maybe you're just an open book and you don't know it. What else? What did you notice? What was the difference? What was the distinction in rounds? Yeah.
It was more about like who you are as a person versus what occurred.
Right. Like the transaction of what occurred, of what am I learning or what assessments am I creating based on that fact. Right? And I didn't cue you to listen for that, but because you were cued to kind of drop down into a different level of listening, you could maybe intuit that. Right? What else? Anything else you noticed? Yeah.
And awareness of values also. How did you do it?
Yeah. Like there's always room, right? So, and what you do as an asker, right, or as a connector, is when I'm sensing those things in a fundraising conversation, I name it. So you're telling me this about what you do, and what I'm sensing from you is that you're really passionate about children's causes, or caring for the vulnerable sounds to me like it's a core value. Am I onto something? Is that right? And then they're like, yeah, right? And what's so great about that is that donor feels heard. That you're not just like, I'm listening to you because I'm really just trying to get to $1,000 ask. It's like, I'm with you. I'm hearing you, and you are more than just a number on a donation card. I'm trying to connect to who you are as a person. And that's what listening does. We don't realize that listening is such a powerful communication tool, because we just think of communication tools as great speakers and presenters. Listening is a direct communication tool. So I want to teach you one more thing. We literally are at noon. So anyone who wants to go, great, but I'm going to take 5 more minutes. Does that sound okay? Okay, great, because I don't think lunch even starts till 12:15. And I'm going to teach you one more thing, and let's see if we can practice. Probably the biggest single issue I work on with CEOs and leaders is their ability or inability to make requests. I spend 3 full days at Georgetown working with people on requests. So 3 minutes isn't going to do the trick, but I just want to introduce you to it. The people have a very hard time with making requests. Why? First of all, it's hard to ask people for things, right? Sometimes we just want to do it themselves, or it just brings up stuff. We don't want people to say no. We fear rejection. And a lot of times why people don't make requests is that they resent the fact that they have to ask for it in the first place. Like, how do you not just know that's what you need to do? It tends to come up more in, your personal life. Like, do I really have to ask for this? How do you just not know this? So we don't make the request, and then what happens? We're disappointed and we're frustrated because we're not getting what we want or need because we haven't asked for it. And it's one of the single biggest factors in organization dysfunction is that we're not making clear, articulate, specific requests, right? Asking for what you want, when you want it, by whom. The other issue is, so that's what this displays. The other issue is when we do make a clear request, there are only 4 responses to any requests. So if I ask Shira for $180, Shira can either say, yes, I can do that. No, I can't do that. She can make a counteroffer, which is, I can't do 180, or I could do 100, right? Or Shira can do a promise or a commit saying, you know what, I need to speak to my husband. Can I circle back to you on Monday morning and get back to you? Not like, we'll see, but it's a commit to commit. The way you know you've made a proper request is if these are basically the only 4 responses that you should get from a request, okay? Now, what typically happens is we get what I call the non-response. What's an example of a non-response?
I'll get back to you.
Changing subject.
I'll get back to you. I'll think about it. What else? I gotta check. What else?
You're amazing.
Oh, good luck.
Good luck.
Could a non-response be like a very, very wealthy person giving you $100?
Well, that's a great question, right? So it is actually a response. It might not be the response that you want, but I'm talking about like verbal non-responses are, we'll see, sounds great, I'll try, I'll get back to you. And guess what? We accept them all the time because they're not no's. We accept the non-response. Except for there's one population in the world that never accepts a non-response. And who's that? Children. Right? So when we moved into our new house and And the house next to us has a pool, right? And my kids spent all summer looking out the window waiting to meet the guy who had the pool. When we finally met him and she accosted him and said, "Hi, I just moved in and can I swim in your pool?" And my husband's dying and he's so embarrassed. And the guy was like, "Sure, anytime." She's like, "Should I go get my bathing suit?" And he's like, "Yeah, anytime." And she's like, "I don't understand." I mean, she broke him. Like she broke him. And I'm sitting there like I couldn't have had a more proud moment. Like she's not accepting the non-response, right? So finally she broke this man until he was like, "How's Sunday at 10 a.m.? And she was like, "Great, when's Sunday?" Like she doesn't know when Sunday is, but children are amazing at because they can't cognitively they can't understand the non-response. They don't get it. We accept the non-responses all the time, and by the way, we give non-responses all the time. One of my running partners in DC was in Jerusalem this week. And she's like, I didn't know you were going to be in Jerusalem this week. We've got to go for a run. I was like, "Oh, that sounds great. Awesome. Let's do it." Do you know how many hours a day I work? I haven't left this building in 4 days. There was no way, the second I said it, there was no way that was happening. But I teach people how to not give non-responses, right? And we give the non-responses because we don't want to disappoint. So a huge part of this, how I'm going to relate it to fundraising, is we have to be careful when we're accepting that non-response. When someone's saying to us, "We'll see," say, how can I follow up with you? Can I call you in 2 weeks? Or what else can I provide for you to help move the needle on this, or help make this decision? So it's how we have the strength to not badger people, but to push through the non-response and to not accept it, okay? Here's the last thing I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna close the door. So the second thing that I want you to remember, in addition to the Shulchan Aruch and offering people opportunities, is this. Behind almost every complaint is a request that hasn't been made yet, okay? Just remember that. Almost every complaint that you have in the world is typically an unmade request. People complain about not making enough money, they haven't asked for a raise. People complain about not getting something in a relationship, they haven't asked for it. Why? Because the consequences of no are so devastating, or I might have to get a new job, or get a new partner, or that I'd rather live in a place of deprivation and frustration and negativity than to actually have to ask. And so it works brilliantly. When you have people around you that are festering and in that spirit of complaining, is to stop and say, "What do you need or want that you haven't asked for yet?" It works with kids too. What do you want? What do you need? Right? But instead, there's this cycle of negativity and complaining because people have not voiced their requests. So the last exercise that we're going to do is to go back to your partner, right? Pick one speaker and one listener. Listener, I want you to try and practice level 3. And the way that this relates to fundraising is very often in fundraising, someone's going to have an issue or a complaint with your organization or something they're not getting or they are getting, and you're going to hear this. You're going to hear like the negativity of the complaining. And it's going to be your job to help that donor articulate a request or to articulate what they need or want that they're not getting. So I want one person in your dyad to let it rip. I want you to just complain about something. It can be your personal life, your professional life. It can be this conference. I don't care what it is. I just want you to be seeped in your complaint. Like this is your shot. And I want my listener to drop down and really try and listen for the unmade request that is embedded in this complaint. We're going to take a minute and a half. Let's go. Listeners to try and see if they heard some sort of request. Let's share that back. Can you try and share it back? Hate to cut off the complainers, but what's the request? Did you hear something? so juicy in here. I'm so sorry to cut us off. All right, guys, I just want to hear like for a minute. How did that go? What did you guys notice? Anyone come up with any opening?
Much harder.
Much harder, right? Yeah. What else? Much harder to like stay present and not like be thinking about fixing it in between.
It's like a more complex analytical process.
Yeah.
To understand what people want versus just like learn about them.
Yes. Right. It's sort of easy to be on that like data collection mode, right? Yeah.
You also I found myself kind of projecting what I felt like you should do in these situations.
I mean, that is so honest. Thank you for that, because it's like, right, we're listening, and the whole time we're like fixing, correcting, consulting, and like we're not really listening, right? Because we've already come up with our own solution or how you would do it differently, and I think dishonest is too strong of a word, but we're not like truly listening.
Like not truly effective.
Yeah. What else? Was anyone able to go ahead?
It's relieving to be on the side that just need to talk.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, complaining, right?
And if you get the donor or the one you want to get to this point, that he feels relieved to talk. So I think this is the moment.
So this is a really important point that Shira is saying, because we tend to be like natural fixers. We want to really fix things. And at the end of the day, and I had to really learn this as a coach because I'm such a fixer and such a solution center, the power of someone just being heard, of just really hearing someone. Which is why, like Lana did this yesterday, I don't know if we had any other, or 2 days ago, the case presentations. It's why when you give a case presentation, right, it's, there's a big section in between when you present the case and the duct tape round. Right? Because we don't want people to go right into like solution. We want them to just really hear the presenter and then formulate questions based on what they're hearing, so that they're present and really hearing before they go into fixing it. So, the relation here is in fundraising is to really, what's it going to take for you to be that present, to let go of agenda and to let go of your budget for a minute, to really hear where this donor is, right? Even if it's a complaint. And then work with them on maybe either reframing it or figuring out what they want or need that they're not getting. Okay? So, so much more to go in this. But, the quick Reader's Digest version is new language, moving from here to here, presence, showing up, the distinctions between requests and offers, how we use the inspiration to inform us, right? Eliminating the spirit of apology. Consumer psychology, what you need to prepare. We packed a lot in. But my biggest wish and intention for you is that if there's just a little bit more openness on this, of extending an invitation and an openness to learn more, and inspiration around this, I will be so fulfilled and happy if you walk away with that. So I want to thank you so much and just wish you great luck moving forward.